Kia ora, g'day, welcome back once again here with part 5 of my reaction to Mr. Chris VanSant, former Delta Force operator, the hunt for Saddam Hussein on the Sean Ryan Show. Let's jump back in.
That force that you knew was going to take the fight to the people that were responsible for this, I think that was huge. So it wasn't discussed. Like, no, I don't think we ever talked about it. And most guys there didn't talk a lot. Like it was a very serious and somber like selection class. You're scared to talk to each other anyway. But there were a handful of guys just like me that had done it the year prior. So they were faces that I knew. And some of them interesting ones, you know, like, I went to selection with Alan Shoemate, who was Walt Shoemate's son, who was one of the early on founders and sergeant majors of the Delta Force. And he was a repeat with me. So like a few of us knew each other, but even then I don't think we talked about 9/11 at all. It was about, you know, the great breakfast that we just had or how bad.
It's interesting, like watching this and being at this stage after having done the reactions to the Tucker Carlson network and the 9/11 files. I think after one of my other reactions to this, I was curious in terms of whether or not those that went on his Delta Force selection course, if there was an increase in the number of those that passed or those that actually completed the Delta Force selection. I wonder if that was the case because of, you know, America, the American people would have been hurting, more so the American people. Other people may have been as well, but by and large, the American people would have been hurting over the events of 9/11. So I was just curious if the success rate improved or increased for a period or for that selection straight after or not long after the 9/11 events, which sounds like would have been Chris's selection course, but also hearing him speak about, you know, they're wanting to get into this fight to bring those people that were responsible for this tragedy, to hold them responsible, to bring them to account. The sad thing for me after watching the Tucker Carlson network and the 9/11 files is that, you know, you got people like this guy and many other people that likely would have joined the military on the back end of what happened in 9/11, thinking that they were going to be deployed overseas to hunt down and capture and or kill the people that might have had a part in and or were responsible for those events of 9/11. But it seems like, man, as I watched that 5-series episode, that it's some of their own people that seem to have been responsible for the 9/11 attacks. And that is, it's disgusting anyway, if that's the case. So who knows, maybe an unbiased and a proper commission will be done without those bloody twats that were roadblocking and hamstringing the initial commission report. Maybe it'll never happen, or maybe one will happen and they'll go, well, it's been nearly 25, 30 years, so the information's old, people can't remember this, that, and the other. Maybe they'll find other ways to corrupt the commission and what was supposed to have been done and what should have been done at the start. Anyway.
We thought today was going to suck.
Was the pulse or the tone of selection from the cadre side any different?
Not a bit. It's
exactly the same.
That's the most professionally run course I have ever attended.
No shit.
Yeah, from in the beginning, from the classes that they give you to make sure everyone has been provided with the same amount of information and you're all at the same level, so nobody has an excuse as to why they were or weren't successful from an education standpoint. It's the most professionally run course I've ever been a part of. And they maintain that to this day. I guarantee it.
I love that he shared that, and it's cool to hear that because that's still my take of the NZ selection course that I did and the Australian selection. Like those two courses, including the cycle. So right from the selection, runs like clockwork, all the T's are crossed, all the I's are dotted, super professional. Then into the cycle, again for both those countries, runs pretty much like clockwork. Now, if there's some scrambling and if there are some things that aren't running the way that they're supposed to, I never saw the instructors or the units make that known. To me as a candidate or as an aspiring soldier to serve in that unit, never once saw that. Everything just ran. If they said something was happening and we needed to be somewhere at a certain time, we were there at that time, and things ran as per what they said they were going to run. So seems pretty consistent. I've heard the same thing about the UK selection and hearing the same thing about Delta Force selection. It's not a surprise. Very cool to hear.
I know it's apples and oranges, but would you say it's more professional than OTC itself?
Different. The intent at selection is to maintain separation between the students and the cadre.
Okay.
OTC is phased. It's a phased approach. So in the beginning, it's very much like that. But then as you progress, eventually you get to a point where it's, hey, you can call me Bob or Joe or whatever. You know what I mean? Like,
I do.
OTC is more about integrating you into unit mindset and the way the unit really functions. So by the time you get to the end, it's a little more like what it's going to feel like in squadron than when you first started.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
It does. Well, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about OTC and what that training pipeline looked like.
Cool.
All right, Chris, we're back from the break. You just wrapped up selection. You got in. You're going to go to OTC. What did they tell you when you made it in selection?
Well, you finish the stress phase, the physical portion of selection, and then you have the board. The board process is what it is. I'm not going to get into it because I think that mental aspect is part of the process.
Mm-hmm.
But when I finished,
I love how there's not a lot known about the Delta Force selection. It leaves a lot to the imagination, and I really like that aspect about what they've nurtured, what they've developed. Obviously, I shouldn't say obviously. There's likely some aspects of it that are very similar to 2-2 because of the founding members, the Charlie Beckwith and I forget the name of the other person, but obviously Bucky Burris as well, Lewis Bucky Burris, I think is his name. You know, some of the guys that were early adopters in creating the Delta Force. So those that have likely been through and or completed or passed the selection course, whether in the UK, whether in Australia, New Zealand, maybe even Canada, I can't speak for Canada, there's probably some understanding there, or my mind's going to places when he's talking about things that he won't really get into and the board and some of the stresses and that sort of thing. To a lesser degree, I only have an insight of some of the officer testing stuff that happens through speaking to some of them, but again, not going into all the details. Well, I don't think they went into all the details with me. So it's interesting, that aspect. And then just my own personal experience from a private, from a trooper, an OL or non-commissioned officer, and the aspects that we go through. I just like how there's not a lot known about the Delta Force selection. It's pretty cool. And I hope that that stays the same. I hope that they don't let a media crew in to watch or observe or create a documentary about their selection at all. I hope it just stays as it is. Unknown.
A guy that I looked up to for years after this happened and got to know a little bit better, but he said after they told me they were I think their words were, "We're going to take a chance on you." Take a flyer here and
we're gonna roll the dice
and see how it works out. But congratulations, you've been accepted and you're going to attend the operator training course. And I don't think I reacted. Like, I think I was just stone faced. There were some funny moments in the board and the questions that they asked, and I put my foot in my mouth a couple of times as a young guy, as you would expect. And the guy that sort of walked me out afterwards, he sort of like put his arm around me and he said, "It's cool, you can smile now." And it was a cool moment. Like, and I think I didn't even realize how like in shock I was. And then that lasted for a brief few seconds, and then I realized I still had a long road ahead of me, and that was the operator training course.
That reminds me of Pohatu from the 1998 selection that's up on the channel when he goes into the CO's office, and you can see the big him wanting to smile, and then the CO was kind enough to say, yes, you can smile by the end of that little process that you go through at the end of selection in NZ anyway at the time. Hard case.
Yeah. Did any of the guys that you knew from before, did they make it with you? Or were you the only one?
Good question. Yes. One of them did. Yeah, a guy went through the course with me. That guy, he's a picture of resiliency, but a number of years later in the unit, he ended up getting blown up by an ID and lost half of his face, really, and went through a number of years of reconstructive surgery. But yeah, he's involved in a lot of veteran issues to this day and held in there and kept doing his thing. But yeah, so one of the guys, yes.
Amazing. Well, let's move into OTC then.
Sure.
Did you go back to your unit first, or are you there now?
I did, but it's really quick.
Okay.
Like you go back and basically out process, and then you move over to the compound. When you're a fall selection and assessment graduate, I guess, for lack of a better term, there's a lot of admin things and some classes that happen early on, and then some basic rifle marksmanship stuff that happens, and then you get a little bit of a break for Christmas, and then you come back hot and heavy. But yeah, it's really quick. I think I had less than 2 weeks back at the unit. I think 11 days later, I reported to the compound.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah, it was an interesting time. Like, there was 9/11 and it happened, and I think we were chomping at the bit. Like, let's go, let's get this on, which I think was a good thing. I think it focused us a little more. You know, I was terrified, and excited, and everything we did, it didn't matter what it was. I was like, yes, because I was this young, hungry kid, so grateful to be where I was, that I think I was just sort of in awe every day and took it all in like a sponge.
It's awesome to hear him speak like that. It makes me smile because it brings back memories for me in NZ first as a 20-year-old and then turning 21 on cycle. But again, just sounds like similar sort of feelings. I was so privileged. I was so excited. I was just couldn't have been happier. And then I was equally happy and stoked and excited in Australia to get through the similar sort of process of selection, to get selected for the cycle, to then start on the cycle and start going through that journey again. But understanding the need to learn and adapt to the Australian way of doing things. It was awesome. Some great people on there and good experiences. So yeah, it makes me smile, makes me happy hearing this guy, Chris, talk about his time, because I can connect to it.
That's awesome. I mean, you'd really... The timing, the way you positioned yourself right after, or, you know, leading up to and right after 9/11, I mean, the timing is, for what you wanted to do, I mean, you couldn't have timed that better.
Yeah, that's some universe shit, like we were saying.
Yeah.
And like I said, the theme continues. Like, my timing with things sort of continues throughout my career, both good and bad, but they all led to where I am today. So
yeah,
I'm grateful for all of it.
Well, let's move into training. Let's day one. What is day one?
Oh man. I'll preface this with I have giant holes in my memory from various injuries and things, so I'll do my best. But yeah, early on it was like I said, it was some classes. And then I think the thing that I was most impressed or taken aback by was how they really started from zero. So you had guys that had been Green Berets for a bunch of years. You had guys that had been Army Rangers for a bunch of years. I think there were 3 guys in my operator training course class that were, for lack of a better term, from the conventional Army. One of them turned out to be one of my really good friends, Mike McNulty, another guy that didn't make it through the course. But they really went back to the basics. You know, literal basic rifle marksmanship is where we started out. So on a known distance range, laying on the ground, you know, rotating between you're a guy on the line, taking slow aim fire shots and working on the fundamentals of marksmanship, to the guy down in the tunnel, you know, lifting the target, putting the pasties on it, lowering the target. They really went back to square one and started with the basics and went through a block of instruction.
I still don't know how or why it was called the Butts Party in NZ. I don't know what it was called in Australia, actually. But you had the up on the mound that he's talking about, out on the range, known distance range. Then you double down, or whoever was the Butts Party going down, because they're the ones that are holding the targets up, lowering them down, targets up, targets down, pace them out, or put the patches on them, all that sort of thing. I didn't hear him mention Butt Party for there, but that's what it was called in NZ. I don't know if it's still referred to that way. I don't know if it's called the same thing in Australia. But pretty interesting and cool to hear that they stripped everything, by the sounds of things, right back and started going over the fundamentals. It's cool.
Like you had never shot a firearm before. And it was professional, it was organized, and I felt like I was actually being taught. You know, like basic training, you kind of go through, there's a little bit of hurriedness to it, where they're just trying to check some blocks and get you to a bare minimum level. This was actual focused instruction, where I felt like the instructors were over your shoulders, they were asking questions, and they were constantly feeding you information and experience that was, you know, the intent was to train you professionally to be an operator.
Is it encouraging? Do they encourage you in that environment, or is it a beat down? Do they use humiliation?
No, it's definitely not a beat down. There is not in selection or in the operator training course is there an element of hazing or intimidation or any of that stuff.
No shit, nothing.
I think the philosophy is, you know, at that point, like you have been asked with very little information to push yourself past your limits, and do the best that you possibly can. And I think the idea is to just move past that and focus on the skills and the fundamentals. So while it is more rigid in the beginning, mainly because you're afraid as the candidate going through the course, but no. So you do physical events, you do PT events, and there are things that are clearly designed to make you suck and push yourself. I think one of the earliest ones I remember was the selection, or the OTC sergeant major at the time, was a guy named John Hale, who unfortunately took his life a number of years ago. One of many that I'm sure you and I both know, but Lumpy was his nickname, I think, from Somalia. But he took us on a P-mask run where we had like bell-fed weapons and protective masks on and running through the sand in the, you know, backwoods in North Carolina there outside the compound. And that was definitely a suck event. Like, we're just going to go punish you and see if these guys still got enough to keep pushing themselves every single day. But for the most part, it was focused on starting at zero and then continuing to advance your skills and education to get you to the level where they needed to be.
Would you describe it as a gentleman's course?
Gentleman's course.
It sounds like more of, without having done it, but it sounds like just a good adult learning environment. Like, you're going to be pushed, you're still going to be not necessarily hazed, but you're going to find out that if you stuff around or if you fail to meet an expectation or a requirement or follow an instruction, there's going to be some type of, usually physical punishment. But they want you, my take is, without having done the data for selection, but if I link to NZ and Australia, even though those two elements are very different in and of themselves, how they run them, the selection, you've already proven that you can suffer and that you're willing to put up with whatever it is for however long it takes in order to get there. That's the selection pieces. The cycle, now you're in that stage where there's still a long road ahead, like what he's talking about, operator training center, I think, or operator training course. Forget what it is, OTC anyway. For them, us, it's a cycle of training where you're going through course after course. Now it's about teaching you the things that you need to be able to do, stripping things back to bare bones minimum if they need to, or back to the fundamentals, so the basics, and then making sure that you can apply, comprehend, take on board the information and apply and implement it to reach the minimum standard required so that you can continually progress, so that you can reach the stage of, okay, we can pull you into as a fully fledged operator now. You've shown us that you have those skills. And now once you get into the squadron, we can develop you even more from there. So that's where my mind goes when he's talking about this. It just seems like not a gentleman's club, It's just more of an adult learning environment. And you are still I was anyway, in both NZ and Australia. I was still on edge. I was still very nervous, apprehensive, even had a little bit of fear, a healthy amount of fear, I think, because I always knew, based on my experience in NZ, you're not in until you're in. So keep your head down, do the work that you're supposed to do, and and keep chipping away. Put your best foot forward.
There's no buffoonery. There's no hazing. There's none of that. It sounds very black and white.
Yeah. Yes, with the exception of the criticality that's placed on you on a daily basis. Like, you are in a learning environment, but it's very clear that if you make a mistake, you do X, and they explain to you, this is what you did wrong, this is how you need to do it different, or whatever that ended up being, that if you don't learn from that experience and you don't implement the corrective action that was taken, you're not going to stay here. So would I call it a gentleman's course? No. I would say it's very professionally run, but the level of detail and scrutiny is so high that comes with its own pressure where all that stuff isn't necessary.
Okay.
As you progress on and you get into CQB and you're doing single man rudimentary, 2-man, and you're progressively working up as you learn the fundamentals, you've got the guys on the catwalk above you, and I think every guy going through the course ends up with a nemesis. I don't know if they work it out amongst themselves or what. I was never an instructor, but it's like one guy goes, yeah, that's my guy. And he might, I had one in particular, we called him the AC-130 gunship, because he would just hover on the catwalk and shoot 105 rounds at me. No matter what I did, I could do no right. Like, VanSant, what are you doing? Why did you do this? What? Just constant. The questions were there, but they were justified. It wasn't like they were just picking shit out like you get in a lot of Army courses where you just know they're messing with you to mess with you.
Yeah.
It was legitimate criticism. So
it's awesome to hear him speak about this, and hopefully it's helpful for aspiring candidates no matter where you are, because it's an important thing to understand going on to selection, going into the cycle, getting into the squadron. Like, you're always going to have the scrutiny of your peers. And the guys, even though you're not a peer per se when you're on cycle, or you're not a peer because you're still an aspiring candidate, the operators that are there, that are watching, that are observing, that are giving you feedback, they're looking at you because they know that they may end up on the same team as you, or you may end up on the same team as them, and they need to know that they can trust you. They need to know that you're squared away, that you can conduct yourself and perform the drills as per the instruction, as per what's required, as per the situation or scenario playing out in front of you. And they need to know that you can take the feedback, that you can put up with the, not beastings, but that you can put up with the barrage of feedback and what may seem and what may look like and make you feel like you're not doing any good and that you shouldn't be there, that continually cause you to doubt yourself. They need to see that you can put up with that, and that you're willing to still keep turning up and go again and again and again.
You have to take it, learn from it, and try to not do it the next time.
What's the retention
in the course?
Yeah.
Ooh, good question. I mean, I think we started with 15. I think we finished with 11 or 12.
Okay.
We only lost a few guys. We lost a couple of guys going through the direct support portion. We had an accident. We had a guy going through the operator training course as an operator, blew his hand off in the course, which was kind of an interesting moment. He was.
Did he just say he blew his hand off?
This is down the road in the course, but we're in. Blew his hand off in the course, which was kind of an interesting moment. He was. This is down the road in the course, but we're in full blown like team CQB at this point, and so it would be like one team would go, and it was exterior breach, and then move through whatever the house was or the facility was. You come out, do a hot wash of the events that just took place, walk back through the house, and go through each room, and then it would be next team up. Well, he was outside and he was prepping his charge. He was going to be the breacher for that iteration, and we were using the old Navy West device, that dual fired firing device. So he had it on the underside of the charge, he had screwed the no-nail into the west firing device, and he was going through his pre-combat checks, and he test fired the west device, but he had hooked it up. And so when he did it, he had the caps and the west device in his hand, and the caps blew basically the majority of his hand off.
Shit.
And it was just it was a mistake. I mean, it was what the course is designed to draw out, is people that aren't capable of dealing with things coming at them from all directions, and being able to be clear and concise and do the basics correct to the high.
Man, that's a cool point that he's brought up. It's disappointing and sad for the guy that had that happen to him, but just highlights what he's talking about there. There's a lot of information coming in. If you're the breacher, the MOE guy, and you've got your charges, the gun, it's called, I forget the technical term for it, but single blasting caps or dual firing caps, the no-nails, your leads, your charges, the det, when you're deading up the charge to make it live now. There's a lot of stuff happening. On top of that, you're either rebombing ammunition, you're getting potential instructions, or other people are talking to you, members of your team or your 2IC or your patrol commander. It can be lots going on, and you have to be locked in into the work that you're doing. But in saying that, like you said, that course and those sorts of things are designed to, hopefully they're not hoping for that sort of stuff to happen, but you're trying to, I guess, weed out to a degree what is essentially what he's talking about, so that stuff doesn't happen on live jobs, and those that potentially aren't suitable or aren't capable of being able to deal and work in that environment and take on board all that sort of maybe sensory overload, information overload. You want to know that sooner rather than later. You want to know that well in advance before ending up in a squadron, ending up on a task or on a job for real.
Nice level. And yeah, and Chuck blew his hand off, and we thought it was a Haddon round. We thought a guy had an AD with a shotgun or something, because it was like a muffled pop. It wasn't super loud because it was just two blasting caps detonating.
Damn.
But he did the hot potato, and the medics came over, treated him, they put him in a truck, drove him off, and the instructor that was running CQB that day basically turned to us right after the truck drove away and said, "Next team up."
Damn.
And like I've told that story for years because it imprinted on me. It was like, okay, yup, accidents happen. We need to talk about what just happened and why. A hot wash and AAR, but our job is to train and prepare for combat, and that's our focus. So we're going back to it, and we did right then and there. It wasn't like they halted training. If that happened in the conventional army, the day is over.
Yeah.
Like the range is shut down. Like nothing is going on after that. There's an investigation. Like, nope, we went within minutes. We went right back to the next team up. Explosive breach, external entry, CQB through the house.
Awesome. I'm going to pause this one here. It's just coming up to 30 minutes, but awesome to hear, man. It's quite surprising the number of little things that I'm picking up, or that I can at least connect to in my own way from my time. Still very different in terms of what he's been through with regards to Delta and all that sort of thing, and as well as the combat experience that he has. But it's cool, the little bits and pieces that I can relate to, and then try to input something during these reactions, which I enjoy doing anyway. So anyway, plenty more to go through. This is still only part one, I think, of a 2 or 3 part series with Mr. Chris VanSant. So there'll be plenty more to come, no doubt. If you made it this far, thank you very much for your time. And as always, the message is the same. Regardless of any difficulties you may be going through, challenges, hardships, dark times, man, just stay in the fight. Keep turning up. Take one day at a time. Put one foot in front of the other. That's all I can put it down to. The sun will shine again. There are better days ahead, and those better days are always closer than you and I think. So just stick at it. Remember, as always, go always a little further. Remember, who dares wins and who cares wins. And until the next video, there's a big mana wave coming from me to you, filled with my aroha, respect, appreciation, and gratitude for you all.